Welcome back to Family Secrets Unveiled. Today, we're diving into a story so deeply interwoven with deceit and psychological terror that it challenges everything you thought you knew about trust. It's a tale that begins with an object so personal, so sacred, yet ends up being the ultimate instrument of betrayal. Meet Clara, 35, an art historian with a quiet, contemplative soul and a smile that could, on a good day, still light up a room. She wasn't an ordinary woman, but a woman navigating a very ordinary tragedy, the slow, agonizing fade of her mother's memory to Alzheimer's. For years, Clara had clung to the one constant that reminded her of the vibrant woman her mother, Eleanor, once was, Eleanor's meticulously kept diary. It was a chronological tapestry of a life well lived, a record of first dates, career triumphs, and the mundane joy of watching her daughter grow. When Eleanor's mind began to unravel, the diary became Clara's anchor, a physical tether to the past she was rapidly losing. It was kept safely locked in a mahogany box, its key always on a chain around Clara's neck. The irony, the terrible twist of fate that sets this whole narrative in motion, is that Clara's life, which revolved around preserving history, was about to be rewritten by a history she never knew existed. It started subtly. A slight, almost imperceptible shift in the weight of the mahogany box. A faint, unfamiliar scent of jasmine lingering around the lock. Clara, a creature of habit and keen observation, noticed. But she dismissed it. Stress, she'd tell herself. The sleepless nights caring for mother are finally getting to you. But then came the discovery. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, while seeking a passage to read to her mother, a memory about a seaside vacation to spark a flicker of recognition, Clara opened the diary. She flipped to the summer of 1998, a period Eleanor always described as the golden era. But the pages weren't there. Not torn out, not ripped, but missing. A clean, surgical cut where pages 47 through 55 should have been. It was as if that chapter of Eleanor's life had been meticulously erased. The initial shock was a cold, sharp stab. Who would do this? And why? Theft was out of the question. Nothing else was touched. It felt deeply personal, an attack on memory itself. Clara tried to rationalize. Maybe her mother had done it herself years ago, in a moment of youthful indiscretion. But Eleanor, even now with her scattered mind, would clutch the book and whisper, "My whole life is in here." Every beautiful word. The fear truly set in 3 weeks later, not with the reappearance of the missing pages, but with the discovery of an entirely new section at the back of the diary. The binding was ever so slightly different, the paper a fraction thicker, but seamlessly integrated. And the handwriting, it was a chilling mimicry of her mother's elegant, looping script. But the voice was wrong. Terribly wrong. Eleanor's entries were filled with warmth and the gentle rhythm of daily life. These new entries, labeled the unrecorded weeks, were dark, frantic, and spoke of things utterly foreign to the Eleanor Clara knew. The man at the dock knows too much. I can feel his eyes even through the blinds. The locket must be kept hidden. Not even he can know about it. If they find the ledger, it's over. Clara's world, built on the solid foundation of her mother's loving, predictable past, began to crumble into a mosaic of fear and suspicion. Who was the man at the dock? What locket? And most terrifyingly, who was writing these entries, pretending to be her mother, and why were they trying to insert a history of fear and crime into her mother's life story? The diary, once a symbol of comfort, had transformed into a living, breathing threat, and the true nightmare had only just begun. The person who wrote these pages wasn't just writing in the diary. They were actively trying to change her mother's past, perhaps to influence her present. And the most chilling possibility, the one that made Clara's blood run cold, was that the person who held the key to this terrifying secret was someone dangerously close. The unsettling calm of the house was shattered by a single, agonizing scream. Not Eleanor's, whose decline had quieted her to a whisper, but Clara's own. It escaped her when she realized the full implication of the forged entries. They weren't just random scribbles of a disturbed mind, they were a roadmap. A twisted, deliberately misleading chronicle designed to frame her mother, or someone connected to her mother, for something sinister. Family Secrets Unveiled always tells you that the people closest to you hold the biggest secrets, but in Clara's case, the secret was actively being constructed in real time, right under her nose. The terror intensified because the handwriting, while a near-perfect replica of Eleanor's, lacked the natural, flowing rhythm of a true diary entry. It was too deliberate, too perfect in its imitation, like a talented artist copying a masterpiece but failing to capture the soul. Clara, the art historian, recognized the forgery not by the ink, but by the intent. Her mind immediately turned to the only other person with access to the house, Marcus, her fiancé. Marcus, a handsome, charming architect with an easy laugh and a seemingly endless supply of patience for Eleanor's deteriorating state. They had been together for 3 years, a whirlwind romance that brought a much-needed lightness to Clara's burdened life. But now a toxic seed of suspicion, planted by those forged pages, began to sprout. Marcus's background was the first thing to draw Clara's cold, analytical eye. He was an orphan, raised by a distant uncle who, Marcus vaguely recalled, was a maritime logistics coordinator. The man at the dock knows too much. The phrase from the fake diary entry echoed in her ears like a death knell. Was it possible? Could Marcus, the man she planned to marry, the man who held her hand during the worst of her mother's episodes, be connected to this dark, fabricated past? Clara began her own quiet investigation. She didn't confront Marcus. Confrontation would be the end, one way or another. Instead, she started looking for the clues mentioned in the forged entries. The locket must be kept hidden. One night, while Marcus was out late on a supposed construction site visit, Clara searched. She tore apart the mahogany box where the diary was kept. She sifted through Eleanor's old jewelry box, filled with costume pieces and sentimental trinkets, but found nothing unusual. The real breakthrough came not from the diary, but from the missing pages. Remember pages 47 to 55? Clara had spent weeks trying to recall the exact content. Eleanor's entries were so detailed, yet the memory of those specific pages was a frustrating blank. It was almost as if they were meant to be forgotten. Driven by desperation, Clara used her background as a restorer. She carefully applied an infrared light to the paper before the clean cut. What she saw made her gasp, the kind of silent, chest-cramping shock that steals your breath. There, ghosted in the residual ink, was not a secret about a criminal past, but a simple, heartbreaking revelation. Eleanor had been writing about a secret medical diagnosis she was hiding from her husband, Clara's father, in 1998. A diagnosis of a pre-Alzheimer's condition, something the family never knew had existed so early. And on page 55, Eleanor had named someone. Not the man at the dock, not a mysterious associate, but a Dr. Alistair Thorne, an experimental neuropsychologist. The missing pages weren't about a crime, they were about a vulnerability. And the forged pages were designed to deliberately replace that vulnerability with a crime, diverting Clara's attention away from a legitimate medical secret to a fabricated criminal one. The moment of peak desperation arrived when Clara found the key to the new entries. While examining the subtle differences in the binding, she discovered a nearly invisible embossed mark on the new paper, a small, stylized T. She tracked the paper source online to a small, private stationery shop in an exclusive part of town, one that only sold custom, high-end paper to a limited clientele. And in the shop's public-facing online gallery, she saw it, a framed commission for personalized stationery, featuring the same stylized T as an emblem. The client's name, displayed proudly in the description, Alistair Thorne. Dr. Alistair Thorne. The name from the missing, erased pages. The name that connected the medical past to the criminal present. But Alistair Thorne wasn't just a stranger. Clara remembered the name. He wasn't a family friend, he wasn't a colleague. Alistair Thorne was the name of Marcus's estranged, brilliant, and deeply reclusive older brother. The uncle who had supposedly raised Marcus, the maritime logistics coordinator with a vague past, was a total fabrication. Marcus had lied about his entire upbringing. The man at the dock? That was the persona Marcus had created to deflect suspicion. The true puppeteer, the mind behind the forgery, was someone with a pathological need to control the narrative, Marcus's own brother, now exposed as the paper forger. But why? Why go to such lengths to frame Eleanor and lure Clara into this terrifying deception? The pieces had come together, but the picture they formed was far more terrifying than Clara had ever imagined. The locket, the ledger, the man at the dock, all theatrical diversions, while the real secret, the connection between Eleanor and Dr. Thorne, remained hidden. Clara realized she wasn't fighting a single secret, but an entire, orchestrated psychological operation. The discovery of Dr. Alistair Thorne's identity didn't bring relief. It brought a paralyzing terror. Marcus, the man she shared her bed with, was a lie. His uncle was his brother, a man actively inserting a criminal narrative into her mother's life. Clara was trapped in an emotional minefield, every word, every touch from Marcus now coded in suspicion. She knew she had to act, but one wrong move could jeopardize everything, including her life and, worse, her mother's fragile peace. This is the moment, listeners of Family Secrets Unveiled, where the line between love and fear dissolves into a terrifying blur. Clara's research into Dr. Alistair Thorne revealed a chilling picture. He wasn't just a reclusive scientist. He was a disgraced figure in the neuropsychology community, stripped of his license for unethical, highly experimental research into accelerated memory implantation and erasure, a process he called narrative redaction. The goal: to replace traumatic memories with fabricated, manageable ones. But the side effect? Complete psychological breakdown. The forged diary entries were a practice run, a way to test his methods by observing Clara's reaction to the new history of her mother. The motive, however, was still a dark, twisted knot. Why Eleanor? Why the obsession with her past? Clara decided on a high-stakes, almost theatrical confrontation, but not directly with Marcus. She needed to draw Alistair out. The very next morning, she played her part perfectly. She approached Marcus, tears welling in her eyes, showing him the forged pages. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I think Mother is experiencing episodes of delusion where she is trying to confess to some kind of past crime. The handwriting, it's hers, but the words are so dark. I'm terrified they'll come for her." Marcus's reaction was the single, most defining moment of their relationship. His expression wasn't sympathy, it was a flash of triumphant relief, instantly masked by a practiced, soothing concern. "Clara, my darling, we need to get her professional help. I'll call a colleague of my uncle. He knows the best people in memory health." He was steering her directly towards Alistair. The trap was set. The confrontation happened not in a sterile clinic, but in the decaying splendor of Alistair's hidden laboratory, a massive, soundproof basement beneath the old, abandoned, maritime logistics warehouse that Marcus had fabricated. Clara had followed Marcus that evening, pretending to be asleep when he left. Alistair Thorne was a ghost of a man, thin, sharp, with eyes that held a fanatic's gleam. He greeted Clara with a chilling smile. "Ah, Clara, the dutiful daughter. I'm glad you could join us. You see, your mother's case is unique." The ultimate, shocking revelation was delivered not as a bomb, but as a cold, surgical explanation. "You see, Clara," Alistair explained, pacing the lab floor, the light glinting off the strange, archaic electroshock devices, "Eleanor was my first successful subject. Back in '98. She came to me because she was terrified of the Alzheimer's diagnosis and even more terrified of how her husband would react. Her desire wasn't to hide the disease, it was to remove the memory of the diagnosis itself. She paid me a fortune, but in return, I successfully erased those pages, those memories. I left a carefully crafted, benign gap." Clara's world spun. Her mother hadn't been innocent. She had actively sought to erase a part of her history. Alistair continued, a terrifying sense of ownership in his voice. "But my experiment failed in one crucial way. Eleanor's memory loss accelerated because the new blank space became a void, a vacuum. She started talking about her missing time, and eventually, she mentioned my methods and my name to Marcus, your fiancé. Marcus wasn't trying to protect me. He married you because he thought you were her key. You see, Eleanor's original diary, with the missing pages, contained a coded notation in the margins, a payment ledger from a Swiss bank, the one the forged pages mention. It's the proof of my unethical work, the ledger I need to destroy. The final twist: Marcus wasn't a co-conspirator. He was Alistair's patient. Marcus, a man plagued by a traumatic childhood memory, had sought out his disgraced brother to erase it. Alistair had agreed, but with one condition: Marcus had to secure Eleanor's diary and the ledger. Marcus's perfect, loving persona was the result of a successful, but temporary, narrative redaction by his brother. The man at the dock in the diary wasn't Alistair, but the old, pre-redaction Marcus that Alistair had replaced, a figure Alistair wanted Clara to believe was the real criminal. Clara was not dealing with a criminal conspiracy, but a catastrophic psychological experiment run amok. Alistair wanted the ledger to save himself. Marcus, his programmed puppet, was just a means to an end. With a horrifying finality, Alistair pointed to a small silver locket on a side table, the locket mentioned in the forged entries. That, Clara, is the key. Your mother hid the locket, which contains the microfilm of the ledger, in the most obvious place. And Marcus, my dear, now that we have the ledger. Marcus, his face suddenly blank, his eyes devoid of the warmth Clara had loved, took a step toward her. The successful persona had faded, replaced by the raw, unpredictable trauma Alistair had temporarily suppressed. The brother had been unleashed, and the target was now Clara. The low, guttural growl that escaped Marcus's throat was not the voice of the charming architect Clara knew, but the raw, unredacted trauma Alistair had unleashed, a primal, wounded core. He lunged. Clara didn't panic. The terror had burned away, leaving only a cold, focused clarity. She had an art historian's eye for detail and a daughter's fierce protectiveness. She knew this lab, this moment, was not about a financial ledger, but about a catastrophic, fragile mind. Marcus, look at the diary. The real pages. Page 55, she screamed, not in fear, but in a command, throwing the original, fragmented diary at his feet. The thud of the old leather cover hitting the concrete floor was loud in the soundproof basement. Alistair shrieked, "Don't listen to her. It's a distraction. Get the locket." But Clara's move was a psychological masterpiece. Marcus, his new persona still battling his old trauma, instinctively looked down. His eyes fixed on the diary, the anchor of Clara's life, and a sudden, violent spasm of memory seemed to ripple across his face. He saw not the criminal narrative, but the genuine object of truth that his brother had sought to destroy. The momentary confusion gave Clara the opening she needed. She grabbed the closest weapon, a heavy, brass paperweight, and hurled it not at Marcus, but at the array of monitors displaying Alistair's notes on narrative redaction. The screens shattered, sparking and dying instantly, destroying his lifetime of research data and the real-time monitoring of Marcus's psychological state. The loss of his data was Alistair's true breaking point. He screamed in pure, unadulterated intellectual agony, momentarily forgetting Marcus and Clara. "My work. You fool. You've destroyed decades of my life." He lunged for the backup hard drives in the corner. It was in that chaotic, explosive moment that Marcus, caught between the two warring forces, made his final, tragic choice. His programmed love for Clara, the beautiful, calm narrative Alistair had implanted, warred with his original, self-loathing trauma. The conflict was too great. He didn't attack Clara. He didn't chase Alistair. Instead, he reached for one of the loose electrical cables exposed by the shattered monitors, thick, industrial-grade power lines. He wrapped them around his own hands, looked at Clara with a fleeting, heartbreaking clarity, a silent apology for the lie of their life, and plunged them into the sparking remains of the console. The blinding flash of blue light, the violent crackle of electricity, and the smell of ozone filled the basement. Marcus collapsed, his body convulsing once, then falling tragically still. He had chosen erasure over a life of forced duality. Alistair, horrified, stopped in his tracks. His experiment, his masterpiece, had literally self-destructed. Clara didn't wait. The police had been called anonymously hours ago, a precaution she had taken based on the escalating threat. She didn't mourn Marcus yet. She simply walked past Alistair, who was now weeping over the still body of his brother and the smoldering remains of his research. Before leaving, she reached for the silver locket. It wasn't the microfilm of the ledger inside. It was a single, folded piece of paper, a short and signed and undated note. It read, "The debt has been paid. Find your own truth, my little historian." It was Eleanor's handwriting. The debt wasn't the ledger. It was the payment for the silence, the price of a daughter's peace over a terrifying truth. Eleanor knew. She had known all along, and the locket was her final, cryptic message to Clara, a plea to let the matter rest. The authorities arrived moments later. Alistair, stripped of his data and his control, offered no resistance, muttering about narrative entropy and the perfect equation. The ledger was never found. The crime the forged diary entries spoke of was just a psychological red herring, a layer of misdirection Alistair constructed to protect the true nature of his work and to secure the proof of his initial success with Eleanor. Clara's ending was not a Hollywood resolution. She didn't get the grand, happy closure. She was left with a devastating, multi-layered grief for the loss of the man she loved, even if he was a lie, for the tragic fate of Marcus, and for the heartbreaking knowledge that her mother had willingly sacrificed her own history to try and protect her family from a terrifying future. She returned to her mother, who, in a rare moment of lucidity a few weeks later, simply squeezed Clara's hand and whispered, "The old me is gone, dear. But I left you a better story." The true missing pages were not the ones in the diary, but the pages of Eleanor's authentic self, erased by her own choice, a final, desperate act of maternal love. Clara, the historian, learned that sometimes the most important truth isn't what's written down, but what's deliberately left out. The darkness had been exposed, but the shadows of those secrets would forever linger. This has been another chilling dive into the human psyche here on Family Secrets Unveiled. The secrets we keep don't just affect our present, they rewrite the past and poison the future. What layers of truth are hidden in your own family's history? Don't forget to like this video if this story kept you on the edge of your seat. Subscribe to the channel for more explorations into the shadows of the human heart, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a revelation. Until next time, stay safe and remember, sometimes the truth is a more terrifying lie than any fiction.